Mercedes team principal Toto Wolff has opened up about his struggles with mental health. Wolff revealed he has been seeing a psychiatrist for the past 18 years. We spoke to Professor Sophia Schneider, who's been treating Toto Wolff, and she said, "Oh, it has been a great success. He's marvelous. He's helped not only me personally, but done such amazing work that psychiatric medicine is all the better for what he's given us." Wow. Quite the result, Toto. Hello and welcome back to Gareth Jones on Speed after a week where we weren't able to make it due to COVID-19, or rather, I wasn't able to make it. But I'm back and slightly throaty, but joining me sounding pure of voice is Sarah Leach.
Hello.
And Zog.
Hello.
How are we, gang? All right?
I'm good. By the sounds of it, I've been doing a lot better than you, Gareth.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it was touch and go, but having COVID is always a bit of a worry. And I don't know if it was the first time I had it or the second time, because I was very ill for about 12 days right at the very, very start before we went into lockdown. And we weren't testing then, so I don't know if what I had was COVID, but I do know that this time I had COVID. And actually, if ever there was a good time to have to isolate at home, this was it. Because I was able to watch all the Bahrain testing in some terrible levels of detail. I soaked it all up. There were 6 hours every day, I think, something like that. And I watched loads of it. Did you two watch any of it live at all?
I didn't, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, I didn't catch any live, but was following it and watching Ted Kravitz's notebooks, for example, updates from testing. He makes terrific content.
Yes.
Really, really love the notebook stuff he does on Sky. But he took it to a new level with his interview with Esteban Ocon, talking in French and showing off his fashion choices. And you saw that.
I saw that. Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
But that aside, yeah, there's a lot to think about from those days of testing. Some apparently dramatic new tech coming in on the Mercedes in particular. So what are your big takeaways from your immersion in testing then, Gareth?
Good question. One is that I still don't think it's clear as to whether Mercedes have got a working, functioning car for this season, because every time I've seen George Russell or Lewis go around Bahrain in the W13, is that the number? Unlucky for some. It seemed to be porpoising terribly, which not only is a performance issue, but also, I think, a safety issue. In that if you're in a car which is bouncing up and down when you're going flat out, it's going to make it very hard for you to press buttons and steer your car and operate the car as you're supposed to be doing. Sarah, have you been able to follow porpoising at Bahrain at all? Where the car seems to be moving very much like I did when I was swimming across Wales, and that is surfacing and going under the surface. So in terms of a car, it's bouncing up and down. What's happening is that the aerodynamic load under the car is sort of stalling. It's a bit like, have you ever tried to empty a bottle full of water? It goes glug, 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 and you can't empty the water out until air goes in. It's sort of choking. And some of the cars have been experiencing that.
Very well explained. Thank you, Gareth. I haven't actually caught too much vision of it. I've been sort of busy working this week, so I haven't had a chance to watch any of the practice, but I have been reading that there has been quite a lot of controversy over the Mercedes car, and that Christian Horner made a few complaints saying that it was illegal. There was lots of sparks coming from the Mercedes car.
Yeah.
And
That's not like Christian Horner to whinge and whine, is it?
yeah, no, especially not about a Mercedes. And even actually Lewis Hamilton has come forward and said that he doesn't think the car is sort of competitive as what he might like.
Well, it's certainly not ready. I mean,
Yeah.
my quick take on it is that what Mercedes have done, and we'll get to the detail of what they've done, that has enabled them to make this dramatic change to the shape of the side pods. But what they've done, it's clearly something that will potentially unlock a decent chunk of speed. Otherwise, they would not be doing it.
Yep.
And I'm going to assume that they're absolutely right, that what they're doing has the potential to unlock all this speed. They clearly are not in a position where they can actually get that advantage yet. They haven't got the installation, the deployment of this new tech on that car working properly yet. They've got work to do, and they're going to be sorting this out at least for the first couple of races. So Mercedes are not in a position to win the first couple of races, but I would be very surprised if once we're past the opening stage of the season, I'd be very surprised if Mercedes haven't got on top of that and we're seeing a good three-way scrap between Mercedes, Ferrari and Red Bull. Ferrari and Red Bull, I think, clearly being the two teams who are ready to go with very quick race packages right now.
Yeah, as I said in the last episode, I think what Ferrari are doing with their aerodynamics, with their gully down the top of the side pod, seems to have given them a fairly stable car. As I understand it, the way to reduce the chance of porpoising is to raise your ride height slightly to allow a bigger slot. However, if you do that, you lose a bit of downforce. So it's a trade-off, isn't it?
Yeah, that I think is kind of the bodge fix. That is the way that you fix your porpoising problem if you cannot address it at a more fundamental level. And this porpoising problem, as you said earlier, Gareth, has to do with the stalling of the airflow. It's this transition between a linear airflow and turbulent airflow. And I believe that's particularly hard to model, which is one of the reasons essentially why we're seeing so much of this on the cars in testing the last couple of weeks, that this is very hard for the teams to model. So it's only when they're getting the cars out on track that some of them are finding that the porpoising is as bad as it is.
It's interesting, isn't it, that they find it difficult to model this in their tunnel and even in their virtual computational fluid dynamics packages, that they didn't actually either spot it or come up with a design that was going to avoid it. And I think it's something to do with when they run a car in a wind tunnel, they have a rolling road underneath it, like a belt, like those things that you run on if you're running in a gym. And that they can't run that belt.
Like a treadmill.
Like a treadmill, exactly. So, yeah. Well, they can't run that rolling road at the sort of speeds that matches the wind speed, and that it's causing them to destroy the belt over a certain speed. That's what I read. That the belt starts fluttering and it would tear the belt to ribbons.
I hadn't heard that, but what I had picked up on is the fact that this domain of fluid dynamics, when you're transitioning from linear behaviour to the turbulent behaviour, which is all to do with boundary layers and this sort of stuff, that transition is one of the more difficult things to model in computational fluid dynamics, in modelling of these systems. And whilst the modelling of the linear flow is very, very good, and the understanding of the more turbulent flow is reasonably good, that in-between area and just exactly when the shape that you have created starts to make the air go turbulent rather than stick with the laminar flow. That's a very tricky area, and that's why the teams haven't understood it, because it's a very hard thing to understand, and the computer modelling they've been using very effectively and very successfully for the last few years of aerodynamic models are lacking in this area because it's very hard, and I guess it's not something that's been quite so important, maybe.
Yes, I think that's fair, yeah.
But to take a step back, another thing that I think is, and we said this before, but I think it's great that we're seeing such different solutions to the challenges of making a race car to this year's rules. The Red Bull, the Ferrari, the McLaren, the Mercedes, they all look different. They all come up with different ingenious stuff to make their cars go quickly. And this is what we want. We want different solutions. We want different solutions out there rather than everything looking the same.
Yep.
So it's great that we've got this shake-up, and it provides opportunities to shake the order up a bit. That said, we've still got Red Bull looking terrifically quick, so it hasn't changed all that much.
Yeah. Sarah, how would you say your view of what you've heard about testing? Who's rocking it? And who's come out 6 weeks early and at the bottom of the pack, would you say?
Well, I think the Alpine Formula One team has done well. I think Fernando Alonso has been right up there. So's Ferrari and obviously Red Bull. The usual suspects, Haas team probably hasn't done so well. Williams haven't done so well, but it just comes down to their individual budgets and what they can do with the car, right?
Haas were very quick on the last day of testing.
Oh,
yeah,
really?
yeah,
Sorry,
yeah.
I'll eat my words.
Well, they were allowed an extra 2 hours because they failed to turn up on the first day, or rather they failed to get all the bits they needed to run the car on the first day. So they were given special dispensation to have extra running. But it does look like they've got a decent car, better than arguably Williams, which looks beautiful but doesn't seem to run as well as the Haas.
I'm sure they've got a better car than the Williams. The question is whether they've got a better car than Aston Martin or McLaren even. Unlikely, I think. But the caveat, it was the last day of testing. There's a lot more rubber on the track. They were running right at the end of the day, so I guess the air's a bit cooler. So there could be all kinds of reasons why Haas had an advantage when they were doing that last day of testing. Nonetheless, the fact that they managed to set the second quickest time suggests they may have a pretty good car to start the season. And the fact that they've put Kevin Magnussen into that car, I mean, maybe we're going to talk about Kevin Magnussen a bit more in a moment, but the fact they put Kevin Magnussen in the car, that I think gives them a real chance to seize opportunities in the very opening stages of the season, because this is a time when everyone's trying to figure their cars out, everyone's trying to get everything working properly. It's quite like Mercedes, for example, will be running the first few races with a car that they're still struggling to get on top of, still trying to get some pace out of, and that's going to continue down the field. That creates a real opportunity for the back of the grid teams, for the midfielders to score points and to get better finishes, better results than they would later in the season.
Yeah.
And with Kevin Magnussen in the car, he can start the season on his front foot. He's not going to be getting to know the team, getting to know the paddock. He just comes right in there with his knowledge of the team, a team that he gets on well with. And so Haas, obviously they're in the big scheme of things, nowhere, but I think they've got a great chance to have a good start to the season. And Kevin Magnussen may well prove his worth. He might have sort of paid off their investment in him, in the first 3 or 4 races.
Yeah, I have to say, I was rather taken aback that they went back to Kevin Magnussen. Sarah, were you surprised when he was confirmed as the driver for 2022 alongside little Mickey Schumacher?
I wasn't overly surprised, no, because he's kept himself quite active. But I was surprised if they didn't even consider Hulkenberg.
Yeah.
I thought he might be brought back in.
That's exactly what I would have done. And poor old Pietro Fittipaldi, who is their official test driver, he got to drive the first morning of Bahrain, and then that's it. He's sidelined. Poor Pietro. Because he did a reasonably good job when he stood in for Grosjean the end of whenever it was, the year before last, I feel sorry for Pietro. And also sorry for, what's his name? Giovinazzi.
Giovinazzi, yes.
Giovinazzi.
Who I thought stood the best chance of coming in because he's pretty much up to speed and did a passable job alongside Kimi, really. I wonder what their thinking was, why they went with K-Mag.
It may be personal relationships that swung it in the end.
Yeah, I tend to think that as well, because he sort of slips right back in there like a glove. And he obviously didn't burn his bridges. Maybe he was more available to sort of come straight out from where he was.
Well, he did almost burn his bridges, because do you remember when Tycho was on the show recently, Tycho noticed that Kevin Magnussen had made some sort of wry comment about the Haas car and had tweeted a picture of something with a joke, and it was a bit of a dig at Haas, but hey, they must love him so much that they're willing to accept him despite that.
Good to Steiner can dish it out, he can probably take it.
Yeah, that's true.
Good luck to Kevin Magnussen at Haas. I think Pietro Fittipaldi, I'm sure, would have done a decent job, but I think if Haas were looking at the start of the season as a chance to get some points, and they want to have a driver who's absolutely ready to go and they know works well with them, makes total sense that they've gone with K-Mag.
I said, what do you think will happen to Mazepin now? He's obviously very out in the cold.
Well,
but will he be out for the whole season?
Oh, yeah.
He's done now. Yeah.
You can hardly even sort of get into the horrible situation that has led to Mazepin being dropped. But that situation isn't changing in the next 6 months to 12 months. No, Mazepin is not coming back for the foreseeable future, is my prediction.
While we're on the subject of Russia and Ukraine and money in Formula One, I discovered something interesting this week that I had no idea about. What is the name of the driver who drives alongside Sebastian Vettel at Aston Martin? It's a challenge. What's his name?
Is this a trick question?
Not necessarily. What's his name?
Our good Canadian friend.
Yes, what's his name?
Lance
Stroll, yes. Lance Stroll.
That's not his name.
Since you've queued that up, can I take a guess?
Yeah.
I think you've given us all the information now.
Yeah.
So I'm going to assume this is the Stroll family name was changed in the early to mid 20th century when they emigrated from Russia to Canada.
It was changed in the last 10 years.
Wow, that's interesting.
Lance Stroll, his name on his birth certificate, it does not say Lance Stroll, it says Lance Strollovich.
No way.
Okay.
You know, a lot of people do that.
And so his father is Lawrence Strollovich, which again is a Slavic name. Ovich, I think, is sort of more Serbian than Russian, but it's definitely that part of the world. And I had no idea.
I think it means son of, doesn't it? So
Ovich.
Vladimir Vladimirovich is Vladimir, son of Vladimir.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, which is Vladimir Putin's middle name. His father was called Vladimir, wasn't it?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
But we won't talk about him there. Yeah, so I was slightly surprised to discover Lance Stroll is Lance Strollovich, and so I'm only going to refer to him as Lance Strollovich from now on. He can call me Gaz Top if he wants, not that he ever will. Whilst we're on the subject of names as well, here's something else that occurred to me. The Alpha Tauri team is, in fact, the Red Bull Beta team, isn't it? You could say.
Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah, yes.
Yeah.
So to all intents and purposes, yep.
Yeah, so we shouldn't call it Alpha Tauri. We should refer to it as Beta Bull, which is a great shame that they didn't have Cyril Abitabull as their manager. It would have been absolutely poetically beautiful.
Very funny.
So if Alpha Tauri are actually Beta Bull or Beta Tauri, does that make Red Bull Alpha Bull?
Very good.
I'm applying logic. It makes no sense. But the most exciting thing, and I'm dying to talk about this, and so we've got to keep this simple.
I knew you were going to love this.
Yeah. The best bit of news that came out of testing in Bahrain absolutely tickled me in ways I couldn't imagine. That is that the Mercedes team, to improve the cooling of their whole system, have gone to, I won't even say a world leader, I'm going to say a planetary leader in that field. And that is a company called Reaction Engines, who way back in Thatcher's period came up with the idea of an air-breathing rocket engine, which has now matured into something they called Sabre, S-A-B-R-E. I can't quite remember what it stands for. But it is a rocket engine, which means that you don't have to carry a great big tank of liquid oxygen with you while you're flying your single-stage to-orbit aircraft or spacecraft up into space, because it can just breathe the air available. They are specialists in extracting cold or usable temperature oxygen from the air by using a 4-stage cooling process. So a kind of set of radiator heat exchangers which make the air dense and cool and functional for rocket engines. So that old joke, it ain't exactly rocket science, motorsport. Well, on this occasion, it actually is. Do you know any more than that, Soggo?
First of all, let's just say that this isn't even rocket science. Rocket science is easy, you know. Bit of Kozlowski's rocket equation, whatever it is, F equals ma, bit of air resistance, bish bash bosh, you're in orbit. You know, easy stuff.
That sounds a lot easier than what I feel like it is.
Rocket engineering is hard, and this is hard rocket engineering. What I know about reaction engines and Sabre, it's worth saying, when you read about the history of reaction engines and where they started, how their technology has developed, it sounds absolutely like a batshit crazy guy in a shed welding some things together going, this is going to go to space. Okay, Grandad, take your pills. Yeah, that. Here are some more spare parts to play with. But this crazy guy, Alan Bond, is it? Is that
That's
the name
correct,
of the guy?
yes. Great British inventor.
Yeah. He may be a crazy guy in a garage, but he is designing extraordinary stuff. He designed a first generation of this engine. And as you say, the key thing about this engine, which is designed to power a single stage to orbit launcher, is that it's a rocket engine that can both use a propellant and liquid oxygen when it is in space. But before it gets to space, when it's in the atmosphere, it can use the air that it's flying through to provide the oxidizer. And that saves you a huge amount of weight when you take off, and it makes the whole single stage to orbit practical. But It is incredibly hard, it turns out. Really very, very, very hard indeed to take in all of the air that you need when you're travelling at hypersonic speed, to cram this air into your engine, funnel it into the combustion chamber. It's very hard to manage this airflow. One of the reasons it's hard to manage is that the air gets very, very hot when you compress it on the way in. You need to cool this air, and you need to cool it very, very quickly. We're talking fractions of a second, and you need to cool an awful lot of it. Yeah, Alan Bond designed a version 1 of this engine when he was working for a defence contractor. I can't remember the details of this, but he designed this basically for a British military application. It was never taken up by the British military, British government, and then after he'd left that job and Alan Bond wanted to commercialise this engine, he wanted to use his own patents, and there were several patents, one of the key ones being to do with how you cool this air. And he wasn't allowed to use the technology because it was
It was under the Official Secrets Act. It was protected, wasn't it?
I don't know how any Official Secrets Act stuff might play into it, but the MOD, the defence establishment, did not want to release the patent for anyone else's use. They wanted to retain the patent, which meant that Alan Bond had to go off and figure out a new way to overcome the tremendously difficult problem of cooling all this air down for his crazy engine without infringing his own patent for solving this incredibly difficult problem. And he did it. He came up with another way of cooling all this air. And of course, it's essentially a big radiator, a big intercooler.
A heat exchanger.
A heat exchanger, precisely.
Scavenges all the heat out of the air. And then the clever thing is that in the Sabre reaction engine's air-breathing rocket engine, that heat energy that they scavenge out of the air, they don't throw away. They actually recycle that to use in the turbo pumps of the rocket element of the motor, which is a very efficient machine. And, you know, we talk about this being a batch crazy idea. It does actually work, and we know this because in 2019, I think, sort of late 2019, reaction engines were able to successfully test their four-stage pre-cooler up to Mach 5 times the speed of sound, paving the way for hypersonic flight. So it does work on a very large scale. All they've got to do now is shrink it down to something that can be carried on a rocket. I mean, they've already shrunk that technology, or the idea of that technology, that can be used in a Formula One car, according to Mercedes. They took advice from reaction engines. Are they actually using their IP or a similar idea, I wonder?
I'd really like to know. I suspect that Mercedes won't be giving away too many details. There's going to be a significant difference here in that I think reaction engines at least designed this cooling system for them. There's going to be a big difference in the way what is on the Mercedes is performing what the pre-coolers are doing on the Sabre engine, in that, first of all, the airflow into the intercooler on the Sabre engine is going to be, you know, supersonic, hypersonic.
Yep.
Massively greater speed, and you're dealing with much higher temperatures. And you're also dealing, I think, with a particular problem that has to do with condensation and even icing up of your pre-cooler. Because when you suddenly cool a mass of air, you can get condensation, you can get ice forming. And I believe one of the challenges they had to overcome in this pre-cooler, which has a lot of very fine pipe work and very fine air gaps, is preventing it from icing up and getting blocked.
Right, but not an issue at motorsport speeds.
Not going to be, not an issue for motorsport speed. But the challenges of using the minimum amount of hardware to move the maximum amount of heat quickly is why they've gone to reaction engines. And yeah, I love that they're using some genuine space tech. Yeah, you and me both. And it has enabled them to shrink the cooling package on the Mercedes so small that they have more or less eliminated the side pod altogether. And the only way that this car is legal is because they're using the side impact protection bar to extend the bodywork out to the point at which you're supposed to have side pods. It's a legality thing. And the clever thing is that they've also got an aerodynamic profile on that bar, which is directing or conditioning the air correctly towards the back end of the vehicle. So if they can make this work, it's a win-win, but they're not close to making it work at the moment. But, you know, they have strength in depth. Let's hope they can sort it out. But this may not be one of the biggest problems for Formula One teams at the moment, as we are now only a matter of days away
from the first race. And Sarah, I'm going to direct this firmly at you because there's one driver we're not absolutely certain he's going to be on the grid, are we?
That's right. I assume that he'll probably be better by the time the race rolls around because, well, I mean, how long did it take you to recover? We're talking about Daniel Ricciardo, by the way. No surprise.
Correct, yeah.
The mighty Daniel Ricciardo, who we all love. We all love Daniel Ricciardo.
Yeah.
Well, Sarah, I was laid out, I'd say about 7 or maybe 9 days in total between not feeling so good and then getting 2 days of negative tests. So is there enough time for Danny Rick? Because he was feeling unwell for a while before he started testing positive, wasn't he?
Yeah, I see. Well, I guess it depends how quickly he bounces back because after you have COVID, you do feel quite lethargic. I don't know whether you had that, Gareth, but when I had COVID in December last year, I was lethargic for a couple of days, as were a few of my friends. Anyhow, if he isn't able to drive, I think they will go for Oscar Piastri. He's been driving the F1 cars and he did spend a whole season last year dominating F2.
Yep.
I don't think they'll go for a Formula E like a Nick de Vries or a Stoffel van Dorn. I think they'll probably go with somebody that's already been in an F1 car. Would you not agree?
I don't know if Piastri is available because he's technically an Alpine driver.
I thought Alpine had offered him to.
Yeah,
I think Alpine have said, if you want him, he's yours.
They've said that now, have
I
they?
think they
Because
said
last time I
that
checked,
on
they haven't.
On loan. But,
on loan,
yeah.
I think. But makes me, all of us realise now that McLaren obviously don't have a reserve driver.
Yeah.
Or reserve driver who they're happy to put in the race like that.
Yeah.
My first thought about Piastri was he's a perfect replacement because you're replacing one Italian-Australian with another Italian-Australian. So this is just,
There you go.
let's go for it.
No one would notice a difference.
And also there's a little bit of, from a kind of fan perspective, we've seen Stoffel van Dorn on track before in an F1 car. I'd like to see Piastri. Let's have a change. Let's see Piastri.
You're absolutely right, Sarah, about Piastri dominating F2 last year. He was fantastic. But I also think Nick de Vries is worth a shot as well. He's a very useful peddler. And the only reason he didn't get picked up was that he was racing at the same time as the likes of George Russell and Leclerc, who are standout drivers. But that doesn't mean that Nick de Vries isn't ruddy handy himself.
Well, he won the Formula E World Championship last year.
Exactly, yeah. So, if you can make those cars go quick, you've got to be good. Sorry, a little dig at Formula E there. All right, well, here we are now. We're recording the show on the Monday. You'll be listening to the show at the earliest on the Thursday, which means Friday we have the new curtailed, shorter Formula One weekend with less running for the teams, less time to prepare. In the case of McLaren, they will have one driver, whether it's Piastri or Ricciardo or Nick de Vries or Stoffel van Dorn, who have never driven this generation of Formula One cars ever, and they'll be expected to test that car on Friday, qualify on Saturday and race. So I do feel sorry for McLaren, who also had other technical problems too. They had real brake issues. They had to curtail their running, didn't they? So poor old McLaren, who we were hoping were going to come out of the trap flying, are going to come out slightly hindered, aren't they?
Yeah, they've certainly got a bit of work to do at the start of the season. Yeah, let's see what they look like 3 or 4 races in, but they're not going to be troubling the front row for a while, clearly.
True enough. Okay, who is going to be the front row? Sarah, what's your guess? Top 3 qualifying on Saturday in Bahrain. Who's it going to be?
Well, at a guess, our good friend Max Verstappen up there because he's been doing very well, obviously, this week. I'm going to say Fernando Alonso. And I wouldn't mind saying, let's go with Lando Norris.
Ooh. Really? You think Lando's going to come out? He was fantastic. The McLaren, before they had the brake problems, they really, really did have a good-looking car. So, yeah, you can't rule them out. That's true. I'm not sure I agree with you on Alonso, though. Zoggy, what would you do? Top 3 qualifying?
Top 3 qualifying? OK, I think it's going to be Verstappen, Leclerc, Sainz.
Oh, yeah, Leclerc. Yes, of course.
I think, yeah, there we go. The Ferrari looks really quick, really drivable, and I thought Leclerc sounded very confident in interviews. He was sort of saying, well, we've got a good, reliable car. We're not quite sure how quick it is yet. But he was sort of saying it in the manner, to me, of somebody that knew they had a very, very quick car.
Yeah, there was a spring in their step, wasn't there? I'm going to say Max pole. I'm going to say Sainz second. And Leclerc third. Fourth, might be Perez, and I'm not sure that Mercedes will have sorted their issues to get them above even 6th at the first race, which could open it up for Alonso, or even the Alpha Tauri, or the Beta Tauri, as I think we should call it. I think that could be up there as well, because it certainly showed speed over the weekend. But the question is reliability. If they all built cars which A, won't burst into flames or break down, we're about to find out.
Well, Williams haven't, apparently.
Oh, Williams, I want them to do well, but I'm not sure they're going to.
So do I.
Yeah.
So do I.
All right, well, that's it. I said that this would be a quick and dirty show, a short, quick show to make up for the fact that for the first time in 18 years of broadcasting or podcasting, we missed a date due to me being just not quite well enough, not enough energy to make a programme. So I do apologise for missing that. And hey, we've made up for it as quick as possible. And we will make up for it next week as well by, of course, being one of the first podcasts to react to the first race of the season. We'll be back not in 2 weeks' time, but in 7 days' time with an analysis of how the first race went and a look back at our predictions to find out whether it was me, Zog, or Sarah who got it right. Or maybe none of us.
Maybe it's going to be me. It'll be me.
Write it down and check back with us in 7 days. But for now, you've been listening to Zog.
Goodbye.
And to Sarah.
Goodbye.
And we'll see you in 7 days for another Gareth Jones on Speed. Say bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
But I'm going to leave you now with a song. Because earlier on I mentioned how rocket science and motorsport are crossing over, well, I thought that's a perfect excuse to revisit a song I wrote 10 years ago. Gareth Jones on Speed. This is Big Audi Dynamite with Rocket Science. See ya.
The cars are on the track. We don't want it to fall apart. That's the last thing we want it to do.
You take a chassis, you make it lighter. Add an engine, you build a fighter. Make it lower, give it more power. Run it and test it for hour after hour. There's no magic, there's no voodoo to make it quicker, just depends on what you do. It ain't exactly rocket science, but it's close. It ain't exactly rocket science, but it's close.
That's why they're called Williams Engineering. Oh, they like that down in Brackley. You must see, mate, you're driving too bloody far.
I manage the air going over the car. I make it suck like a Dyson. I make that sucker stick to the tar. The very idea's enticing.
I don't like those people.
There's no magic, there's no voodoo to make it quicker, just depends on what you do. It ain't exactly rocket science, but it's close.
The rocket will open command the gate of heaven.
It ain't exactly rocket science, but it's close.
Suspension and we see it hopping. We don't worry about the brakes, these cars that will stop it. We know how to hit it so much quicker. No secret, fuel low. Thanks to God, not even writing on the side with lights and graphics. You just can't change the laws of physics.
Take a chassis, make it larger. Automotive, you motor, make it lower, give it more power. Run it and test it, there's no magic, there's no voodoo. Making it quicker just depends on what you do. It ain't exactly rocket science, but it's close. It
exactly rocket science, but it's close. It's very close.
He wants to stop bitching about it. Get it in the wind, devil.
For information on how to contact the show, see pictures, get song lyrics, follow us on Twitter, find our Facebook fan page, or to sponsor the show, go to garethjones.tv. Gareth Jones on Speed is made in London by Whiz Bang.
Gareth Jones on Speed!